Picture a palace made of marble, floating on the sea. Now look underneath it. The marble is standing on wooden posts, millions of them. Trees cut down in mountain forests 200 miles away, dragged to the coast, floated across the water, and hammered upside down into black, stinking mud until the mud held them like teeth in a jaw. Every church, every palace, every golden ceiling in this city is standing on drowned trees and rot. The most beautiful city in the world is balanced on a swamp, and the swamp never stops trying to take it back. Add the smell of a canal at low tide in summer, which is the smell of everything 500,000 people have ever thrown away, cooking gently in salt water. Add rats the size of small cats, moving along the water lines at night. Add the fact that the drinking water falls from the sky and is stored in cisterns under the pavement. And if the sea gets into your cistern, your whole neighbourhood drinks brackish poison for a month. Add gold mosaics that took 400 years to finish, and silk from China, and spices from islands nobody can find on a map. All of it piled up in warehouses 6 feet above the water that wants to swallow it. That's Venice, the richest city in Europe and the most fragile. A place where you could hear a choir singing music so new and so strange that visitors wept, and then walk 20 steps and watch a dead dog float past a palace door. A place with no walls, no gates, no land to invade, and one enemy no navy could stop, already moving toward it along the trade roads from the north in this year of 1630. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists gliding past the facades. We're going underneath, into the mud, the boatyards, the pitch smoke and the bilge water. One day, well, one long stretch of days, one person. Everything he would have seen, smelled, heard and survived. And some things he almost didn't. So I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just quietly fascinated by plague barges and canal mud. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. The water is inside the boat. That's the first thing you understand before you understand anything else, before you even remember your own name. You're lying in the bottom of a flat-bottomed sandalo tied up under a bridge in the dark because sleeping in the boat was supposed to save you the trouble of walking home. And now there is a finger's depth of cold water soaking through the back of your shirt, and it is rising. The boat is leaking. The boat you spent yesterday recorking is leaking, and if Maestro Zuane sees it half swamped at his own mooring in the morning, the beating will be the least of it. The beating you can take. What you cannot take is the word he'll say afterward quietly, the way he says everything useless. Because a caulker's apprentice who cannot keep water out of a boat is not an apprentice. He's a mouth. And Venice in 1630 does not feed mouths that don't work. You sit up fast and the boat rocks and cold water runs down into your breeches. Your fingers are stiff. It's the hour before dawn, that dead hour when even Venice is almost quiet, and the cold coming off the canal goes straight through wet linen into your spine. You feel along the bottom boards with both hands, palm flat, reading the wood in the dark the way you were taught, because eyes lie in this light, but skin doesn't. There. Under the middle bench, a seam weeping steadily, a cold thread of water pulsing up between two planks. Your oakum has spat itself out. Yesterday's work, 4 hours of it, hammered into that seam strand by strand, and the seam has coughed it back up like a bad tooth. You know why too, which makes it worse. You cooked it at low water in the sun when the planks were dry and shrunk. Then the tide came up, the wood drank, the planks swelled, and they squeezed your loose, hurried, lazy caulking straight out of the seam. Maestro Zuena told you this would happen. He told you in exactly 4 words. Wood moves, boy, wait. And you didn't wait, because you wanted to be finished before the bells of San Travaso rang evening, because there was a girl selling roast pumpkin on the fondamenta, and you had 2 soldi in your pocket. The pumpkin was good. This is not a comfort. Your name is Marco Bonvecchio. You're 16 years old. You were born on the island of Pellestrina, a strip of sand and fishing huts an hour's sail down the lagoon, and you've been in Venice proper for a year and a half, apprentice to Swan the Calca, Swane el Calafao, everyone calls him, in a squero, a boatyard, on the Rio of San Travaso in the parish of Dorsoduro. Your father gave the maestro 3 ducats and a barrel of salted fish for the privilege. 3 ducats is most of what your father sees in a year. You do the arithmetic of that every time you're tempted to be lazy, and then, being 16, you're sometimes lazy anyway. Right now, you bail. There's a wooden scoop under the stern bench, worn smooth as a spoon by 100 years of hands, and you bail in the dark, fast, the scrape and slosh of it loud between the stone walls. Scoop, twist, throw! Scoop, twist, throw! The water hits the canal surface with a slap that echoes off the bridge above you. Your shoulders find the rhythm before your mind does. This is the truth about Venice nobody paints. Half this city's life is somebody, somewhere, moving water out of a place it wants to be. By the time grey light starts to come down between the houses, the boat is dry enough to shame you, because now you can see the seam clearly, and you can see exactly where your caulking iron wandered, where the strands of tarred hemp lie thin. A seam should be packed so hard it rings when you wrap the plank beside it. Yours rings like a wet sock. The bells begin. Not one church. Never one church. Not here. San Travaso first. Close and heavy. So close you feel it in the boat's planks. Then the Gesuati along the Zattere. Then across the water, Angelo Raffaele, San Sebastiano, San Barnaba, and under all of them, far off, a deep bronze voice that everyone in this city knows without thinking, the way you know your mother's step. The Marangona, the great bell of the Campanile of San Marco. It's called the Marangona because it rings for the Marangoni, the carpenters, the shipwrights, the working men. It is literally the bell that tells the caulkers to caulk. It has been ordering people like you out of bed for centuries, and it is ordering you now. You untie, take the single oar, and stand to row the way everyone here rows, facing forward, pushing, the oar working in its wooden crutch with the knock and a groan at every stroke. Your hands find the shaft's worn places. The canal water is the colour of old tea. Something soft bumps the hull. You don't look, and the smell rises as your strokes stir the bottom mud, that low-tide smell, sulphur and salt and rot, the swamp reminding you what the city is standing on. On Pellestrina the sea smelled clean. Here the sea has been used. The Scherzo of San Travaso opens off its Rio like a wound in the row of houses, a sloping yard of black earth and wood chips running straight down into the water so boats can be hauled out and slid back in. At the top of the slope stands the Tisa, the work shed, timber built with an outside staircase and a wooden balcony hung with tools. And here's a strange thing you learn your first week. The Scherzo looks like nothing else in Venice. It looks like a mountain barn. Because it is one, more or less. The Squareroli, the boat builders, came down generations ago from the Cadore, the same alpine valleys that send the city its timber floating down the Piave River. And they built their yards the way their grandfathers built barns, and nobody has seen a reason to change. In a city of marble, you work in a piece of the mountains. 3 gondolas lie hull up on trestles in the yard like sleeping animals, black and gleaming. Black by law, mind you, not fashion. The Senate got tired of nobles ruining themselves, gilding their boats to outshine each other. So more than 100 years ago they ordered every gondola painted black, and black they have stayed. The paint is really a skin of pitch and varnish, and renewing that skin, seam by seam, coat by coat, is a large part of why you exist. Maestro Zuani is already at the fire. Of course he is. You have never once arrived before him. He's crouched at the pitch hearth at the yard's edge, a squat brick box with an iron cauldron seated in it, feeding split pine into the flames with one hand, and the smoke is going up in a thin grey line into the pale sky, and the smell of hot pitch is already spreading across the yard, sharp, resinous, catching the back of your throat. It's a smell you now carry in your skin, your hair, your one spare shirt. On Sundays at Mass, you're the boy who smells of tar, and everyone knows exactly what you do and exactly what you're worth, which in Venice are the same question. He doesn't look up. He's a small man, Zwain, near 50, built like a mooring post, bald under his cap, with forearms where the veins stand up like caulked seams. 35 years of swinging a mallet live in those forearms. His right hand can't fully open anymore. It has curled around the shape of a caulking iron and decided to stay. The Sandolo, he says, not a question. You feel your face go hot. The forward seam opened, Maestro. I'm redoing it this morning. You caulked dry wood in the sun. Yes, Maestro. And the tide came up. Yes, Maestro. He stirs the pitch with a long iron rod. The black surface folds over slowly, glossy, smoking. He's quiet long enough for the fire to crackle twice. Water is patient, he says. You are not. One of you will win. That's the whole lecture. He tips his chin at the woodpile, which means bring pine, and the day begins. Understand what this place is, this little yard, in the body of the city. Venice builds great ships too, war galleys, round-bellied merchantmen. But those are built behind walls, in the arsenal on the far side of town, the state shipyard, the biggest industrial anything in Europe, where thousands of arsenalotti work under oath and armed guard, and a galley can be rigged out in a day when the Turks are pressing. That is the city's fist. This squareo, and the dozens like it tucked along the small canals, are the city's fingers. Everything in Venice moves by water or on a man's back. There are no carts. There are no horses. Well, nearly none. A few great houses keep them for show, poor confused animals. Every cabbage, every barrel of wine, every stone, every corpse, every bride travels by boat. Somebody has to build the boats. Somebody has to keep the water out of them. That somebody's newest, lowest, dampest employee is you. Your morning is the Sandalo's seam, and it goes like this. First you rake out your own bad work, dragging the hook iron down the seam, pulling yesterday's oakum out in sad, wet strings. Each string is 4 hours of your life coming out of the wood. Then you dry the seam with a rag and wait. Wait this time, while the sun comes over the rooftops and finds the yard. Then the real work. Loose hemp fibre, stiff with tar, rolled against your knee into a loose rope. The caulking iron, a blunt chisel, its edge grooved, set against the seam. The mallet. A colca's mallet is a strange instrument, long-headed, slotted so it rings when it strikes, and a good colca listens to that ring the way a doctor listens to a chest. Strike, and the iron drives the hemp deep. The note is dull while the seam is hungry. You feed it, strand after strand, setting, striking, your knuckles grazing rough plank, splinters finding the cracks in your skin where old splinters lived. The tar gums your fingers, your knees grind into the earth. Strike, 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 shuffle sideways, strike. And then, somewhere along the plank, the note changes. It rises. The seam is packed so tight the whole board sounds. A clean, hard knock like a bell with a cold, and that sound in your hands. Up through the mallet is the sound of water being told no. By mid-morning your right forearm is burning and your knees have gone through the ache into numbness, and you have learned again the only lesson this trade teaches, which it teaches every single day. The sea is stronger than you, and cleverer, and has more time, and your entire craft is a long argument you can never finally win, only refuse day by day to lose. You're pouring hot pitch along the finished seam, carefully, a thin steaming ribbon out of a long-spouted ladle. The smell so thick you breathe through your mouth. When Piero comes down the yard with the hand-barrow, Piero is the other apprentice, 19, from Chioggia, at the lagoon's southern end, which means he considers you, a Palestrina boy, practically his little cousin, and definitely his inferior. He has a broad, happy face, a broken front tooth from a mooring rope that snapped, and an inexhaustible supply of information, roughly a third of it true. They stopped a boat at the Lido this morning, he says, in the voice he uses for good disasters. Milanese merchant. No health pass. The signori of the health office turned him straight around, wouldn't let him so much as tie up. So? Piero sets down the barrow, leans in. Why do you think, eh? What do you think is in Milan? You know what's in Milan. Everyone knows what's in Milan. The way you know about a fire 3 streets away, from the smell in the air, from what people don't say. The armies came down into Italy last year, French and Imperial, fighting over who inherits Mantua, and the German soldiers marched with something in their baggage older than any war. It's in Milan now. It's in Verona, some say, and Verona is on Venetian land. Verona is the Republic's own city, and Verona is not far. Venice doesn't take plague, you say. And you believe it, mostly, the way you believe the marble facades. We have the lazaretti. We have the health office. It's water all around us, Piero. Plague can't row. Piero grins his broken grin. Everything rows here, little cousin. That's the whole point of the place. And he trundles off with his barrow, pleased with himself, and you go back to your pitch, and the ribbon of black steams and settles into the seam, sealing it, and you don't know. How could you? That you will remember this exact, stupid, cheerful conversation for the rest of your life. Midday, and the yard bakes. The marangona rings the paws, and the men eat in the shade of the tisa, sitting on stacked timber. There is bread, hard enough that you soak it, and there is the soaking liquid, a thin wine cut with water, and there is polenta gone cold and solid enough to slice. And there are 3 small fried fish that Zwein's wife sent down, which the maestro divides with his knife into exact fifths for 5 men without appearing to measure anything. You get a 5th. You're the lowest thing in this yard and you still get a 5th. You have thought about that more than once. On Palestrina, in a bad winter, nobody was dividing anything into 5ths. The men talk timber. The men always talk timber. A raft of larch is coming down the Piave from the Cador, and there's an argument about whether the mountain men fell it in the right moon. Because everyone here believes, with total seriousness, that wood cut under a waning moon in winter is denser, quieter, drinks less water, and you have stopped smiling at this because you have handled enough planks now to suspect the old men might simply be right. Larch for the hull planking, because larch fears no water. Oak for the ribs and stem, because oak takes a curve and holds it like a grudge. Cherry and walnut for the small fine pieces, and lime, soft obedient lime for carving. A gondola is not one wood. A gondola is a parliament of woods, each doing the one thing it does best, and the squararolo is the man who makes them agree. And you learn, in these midday talks, the thing that will keep you loyal to this dirty yard forever. The boats you build are slightly, deliberately, wrong. A gondola's hull is built askew, leaning, lopsided, one flank fuller than the other, because it is rowed by one man, standing on one side with one oar, and a straight boat would spin in circles under him. So the builders bend the whole body of the boat around the body of the rower, a crookedness so exact it becomes a kind of straightness, and the boat runs true. Nobody wrote this down. It lives in eyes and thumbs and in wooden templates hanging black with age on the teaser wall, and it is passed mouth to hand to mouth, from men like Zwain into boys like you. And if the chain ever breaks, no book in the world will mend it. In the afternoon you're sent across the city, and this is the part of the day your legs dread and your eyes love. Zwain needs tallow and a sack of hemp from the Ropewalk district over by the Arsenal, the far side of everything, and no, you may not take a boat. Boats earn money and boys have feet, so you go on foot, and going on foot in Venice means entering the labyrinth. Calli, the alleys, some of them so narrow your shoulders brush both walls, so narrow the sky's a bright thread far above and washing hangs across it like flags of a poor navy. You move through smells the way other cities' walkers move through neighbourhoods, the hot iron and horn stink of a smith, then bread, then the sweet reek of a wine shop, spilled dregs, then a fish stall, then crossing a bridge, the canal itself, breathing up at you between the stones. The crowd thickens as you come up toward the Rialto, and here I need you to understand what the Rialto is, because it is not a bridge with some shops on it. It is the counting house of half the world, and it has been for 500 years. The bridge itself is new, newish, a single marble arch flung over the Grand Canal about 40 years ago, after they finally gave up repairing the old wooden one that kept burning and once simply collapsed under the weight of a crowd. Marble arch, 2 rows of shops running up and over it, goldsmiths and jewellers, and beneath its white span the Grand Canal jammed with traffic, barges and gondolas and ferries shouting each other out of the way. And around the bridge, on the San Polo side, the market. Banks that are really just benches. Banco means bench, that's where the word comes from. Men doing the money of nations across a plank table. And the German merchant's great warehouse palace by the bridge, and spice sellers whose sacks sent a whole street. Pepper, cinnamon, that dusty golden smell of money itself. You push through it with your empty sack and your greasy errand, invisible, a tar-smelling boy in a crowd of silk, and you keep your hand on your few coins, because Piero has explained to you at length what quick fingers can do in a crowd, and Piero would know. But here is what you notice today, because once you've heard a thing, you hear it everywhere. The talk. Under the shouting of prices, in the doorways, men with serious faces, and the words drifting out. Verona, Bergamo, Sanità, the health office, Fede de Sanitar health passes, a merchant saying, too loudly, that it's all exaggeration, that trade is being strangled over a few sick beggars in the terra firma towns, that Milan's misfortune is Milan's business. Another answering quietly that his cousin carries letters for the health office, and that the magistrates have been sitting past midnight every night for a month. Prices moving on rumour, grain up, and through all of it the shop still glittering, the gold still weighed, the bridge still white as a tooth over the brown water, marble above and underneath, if you knew how to listen, the first cold thread of water pulsing up through a seam. You get your tallow, you get your hemp. The hemp comes from around the Arsenale quarter, where the state's own rope house, the Tanner, a building so long the rope walkers inside can lay out cables hundreds of feet in one run, spins the cordage of the war fleet, and where even the leavings and offcuts that trickle out to little yards like yours are better hemp than most cities' best. You heft the sack onto your shoulder. It's heavier than it looks. Hemp always is. A dense, dead weight that finds your spine. And as you turn for home along the northern quays, you see something that stops your feet. Out on the water, north across the lagoon, flat as beaten pewter in the late light, there is an island with walls. Low walls, a chimney or two, a church tower, ordinary enough at this distance. Boats are moving toward it. Not many. A few. Big flat-bottomed cargo boats, the kind that usually carry firewood or flour, and they're riding low, and they are being rowed slowly, and there is something in the slowness. Boats in Venice do not move slowly if they can help it. Time is freight. An old porter is coiling rope near you on the quay, and he sees where you're looking. Lazaretto Nuovo, he says. The new one. Quarantine island. Goods under suspicion. They take the cargoes out there, open the bales, air everything 40 days in the sheds. 40. Quaranta. That's the whole word, boy. Quarantina. The 40 days. We invented it here. 200 years ago now. First city in the world to think of it. He spits without heat, a punctuation mark. There's the old one too, Lazaretto Vecchio, down south by the Lido. That one's not for goods. What's that one for? He looks at you the way old men look at boys who make them say things out loud. People, he says, and goes back to his rope. You carry the hemp home the long way, along the Zattere, the sunny southern quay of Dorsoduro, where the timber rafts come in, and the air smells of sawdust and open water, and the sack grinds your shoulder, and you switch shoulders, and the sun goes down into the lagoon in a sheet of copper, and the salute does not exist yet. Remember that. Hold that empty piece of skyline in your mind, that gap of air at the mouth of the Grand Canal, where one day a great white church will stand. Because before this story is over, you will watch the city promise to build it, and you will know exactly why. Zuan checks your seam before he lets you eat. He does it the way he does everything, without ceremony. He walks to the Sandalo, now floating on its mooring where you relaunched it at the evening tide, and he steps down into it, all his squat weight, and stands there a moment, feeling the boat through his feet. Then he crouches and lays 2 fingers flat in the bilge along the forward seam and holds them there and waits, his face perfectly empty, while the canal slaps the hull and the swallows go over. Dry. He climbs out. He doesn't say good. In a year and a half he has never said good. He says, "Tomorrow we haul the Grimani gondola. You'll do the port garboard yourself. And you have to turn away and pretend to fuss with the mooring line, because the garboard is the plank next to the keel, the deepest seam, the one that matters most, the one where bad work drowns people. and he has just told the whole yard, in 7 words, that the boy from Palestrina is becoming a caulker. Your eyes sting. It's the pitch smoke. It's absolutely the pitch smoke. That night you sleep where you actually sleep, when you're not being a fool in boats, in the Tisa loft, on a straw mattress under the roof tiles, with the yard smells rising through the floorboards, pitch, shavings, mud, and the tools hanging on the walls around you like the sleeping shapes of the trade itself. Rain comes some nights and walks across the tiles a hand's breadth above your face. Tonight it's clear. Through the loft's little window you can hear Venice doing its night work. Water knocking on stone, a late oar, someone singing far off in the wine shop dark, 2 cats declaring war, the watch calling. 500,000 heartbeats on a raft of drowned trees, and under everything, so constant you have stopped hearing it and only feel it, the tide easing in, easing out twice a day forever, the lagoon breathing under the floor of the world. Your hands throb. There is tar in the creases of them that no scrubbing moves. It will wear out before it washes out. There is a splinter in the fat of your left thumb that you'll dig for on Sunday. Your shoulders are 2 dull stones. This is what 16 feels like in a boatyard, and it is not entirely a bad feeling. It is the feeling of being spent honestly. You think of Palestrina before you sleep, the way you do most nights, the long thin island where the houses paint themselves pink and blue so the fishermen can tell them apart from the sea, your mother salting the catch, your father mending net with a wooden needle, his hands as tarred as yours are becoming. They gave 3 ducats and a barrel of fish to make you a Venetian craftsman. Guild men eat in the winter, your father said. Fishermen pray. You are becoming a guild man. You are learning the water's arguments and how to refuse them. The city is enormous and knows you a little more each month. The bread woman on the Fondamenta knows you. The ferryman at San Barnaba knows you. Piero calls you little cousin, and today the maestro gave you the garboard. It's enough. For tonight, in the loft, with the tide breathing, it's enough. You don't know that it is June, and that in a house in the parish of San Vio, not 10 minutes' walk from where you're lying, a man who arrived from the mainland with a fever is being looked at by a doctor. You don't know the doctor's frown. You don't know the word he is refusing so far to write down. Sleep now, while the city still doesn't know either. The Grimani gondola comes out of the water at first light like a black fish giving up. Hauling out is the whole yard's work, and it goes by shouts. Rollers, smooth logs laid on the slick sloping earth of the Sciero, lines to the bow, men on the lines, you among them, bare feet fighting the greased slope, and the boat comes up out of the Rio a hand's width at a pull, streaming, her underbody showing at last, and the underbody of even a nobleman's gondola, the part the world never sees, is a horror and a lesson. Weed in green beards along the waterline, barnacles in crusts, black paint gone grey and soft in patches, and in the soft patches when Duane presses with his thumb, the wood gives, just slightly, just enough. And he grunts, and you know that grunt. The worm, Teredo, the shipworm. Not a worm at all, the old men say, but a kind of clam that has given up its shell for appetite. It enters wood as a speck through a pinhole, and then eats tunnels inside, growing as it goes, and a plank can look whole and be lace within. And this soft-bodied blind thing shorter than your finger, is the true ruler of the Mediterranean. It eats galleys, it eats empires. The arsenal sheathes hulls and doubles planking and burns the bottoms of ships with fire to boil the worms in their tunnels, and still the worm eats. The lagoon's brackish water slows it, which is one more secret reason this impossible city can exist at all. But slow is not stopped, and every boat in Venice is in a foot race between maintenance and appetite. So the day is fire and scraping. The weed comes off with long-handled scrapers, filthy work, the reek of it, sun-cooked canal growth. A smell that will be on you for 2 days. Then burning off, reeds bundled and lit, flame played along the hull to soften the old pitch, and you follow the fire with a scraper while the pitch is warm, peeling black ribbons that curl like something alive, your face roasting, your eyes running, sweat cutting channels through the soot on your arms. By noon you are a devil from a church wall, red-eyed, black to the elbows, and the gondola lies stripped, pale, oddly naked, her lovely crooked body showing every plank and every sin. And then the garboard is yours. Zuan hands you the irons, his own second set, which is a speech in itself, and walks away to the other flank and does not watch you, which is how you know he will be aware of every stroke. You kneel. The seam runs away from you along the turn of the hull, deep in shadow, the plank cool under your palm even in the heat of the day. You rake it clean, you dry it, you roll your hemp on your knee, tight this time, tight as rope. You set the iron, and for 3 hours the world is one seam. Strike, the ring dull, feed, strike, shuffle. Your knees on ballast stones, your neck cricked under the hull's overhang, flakes of soot drifting down onto your face, the mallet's ring bouncing back at you off the earth. Sweat runs into the splinter cracks of your knuckles and finds every one. Your right forearm goes from burning to trembling, and you change your grip and go on. Strike, feed, strike. And plank by plank, foot by foot, the note climbs, dull to hard to that clean bell knock of a seam packed home, and you chase that sound down the whole length of a nobleman's boat until the light goes bronze, and when Zuane finally comes around the stern and raps the plank beside your last iron width with one curled knuckle, and listens and raps again, he says nothing at all, which from him is a parade with trumpets. Piero, mixing pitch at the hearth, catches your eye and taps his broken tooth, which is his salute. That evening, for the first time, the maestro pours you wine with his own hand, one finger of it into your water, and the men talk, and because your arms are dead and your seam rang true, you feel, briefly, bulletproof, the way 16 feels on its best evenings. The talk goes where all talk goes now. Bergamo is bad, someone's brother-in-law says. Brescia is bad. The health office has put a cordon on goods from half the mainland, and old Menego, the yard's oldest man, who caulked galleys in the arsenal 40 years ago and remembers the last great plague, 1575, 76, 77, the one that killed a third of the city, the one they built the great church of the Redentor to close. Old Menego says, into the fire, not arguing with anyone. Last time they also said the water would keep it out. Nobody answers. The pitch pops. Somewhere a bell rings the hour, one of the 100 bells, and for once you hear it the way a stranger would. Iron voices over dark water. Beautiful and counting something. Before the feast, before any of what's coming, let me give you an ordinary Thursday, because ordinary Thursdays are where a city actually lives, and because this one ends somewhere high. It starts with water, not canal water, drinking water, which in Venice is a different substance entirely, almost a different element. Here is a riddle the whole world laughs at. Venice is in the water and has no water. The canals are salt. The lagoon is salt. You cannot dig a well. A well here strikes brine before it strikes anything worth drinking. So the city drinks the sky. Every campo, every one of those little paved squares in front of every church is secretly a machine. Under the pavement lies a great clay-lined pit packed with sand, and the pavement slopes. Look at your feet, it always slopes, toward stone drains at the corners, so that rain falling anywhere on the square runs down into the drains through the sand, which filters it and gathers cool and sweet in a brick shaft at the centre. The carved wellhead you see in every Venetian square, the one artists love to draw, is just the visible neck of a buried rain-drinking beast. There are thousands of them, and the water in them belongs to everyone and to no one, which means it belongs to the women, because it's the women who own the wellheads in every way that matters. The parish well opens at the ringing of a small bell, morning and evening, and the copper buckets go down and come up on their ropes, and while they do, the parish conducts its parliament. Who is marrying whom? Whose son shipped out for Corfu? What the fishmonger dared to charge for eels? You are sent most mornings with the yard's 2 buckets, and you have learned to stand in that line with your ears open and your mouth shut, because everything the Senate will know by Friday, the well of San Travaso knows by Tuesday. The rope is wet and fat in your hands. The full buckets come up streaming, and you carry them back on a wooden yoke across your shoulders, 40 pounds swaying at each end, your steps gone short and flat like every yoked walker's since the world began. And if the summer has been dry and the cisterns low, water barges come in from the River Brenta on the mainland and sell fresh water by the pailful, and the poor buy sky-water futures like merchants, and you understand the city one notch deeper. Even the rain here is freight. This particular Thursday, Zwain sends you across the whole city again, but this time to the gates of the one place every boy in Venice wants to see, and almost none ever will. The Arsenal. You go for oakum, of all humble things. The state auctions off barrels of picked rope fibre that's below navy grade, but gold for a scaro. And collecting it means presenting yourself at the land gate of the shipyard of shipyards. You smell it before you see it. A quarter of a mile off, the air begins to carry hot pitch. Not your little cauldron's breath, but pitcher's weather, pitcher's climate. And under it tarred rope, and oak sawdust, and the char of the steaming pits where planks are cooked until they bend. Then you come round a corner in Castello, and there it is. A wall, a real wall, brick, high, with towers, running on and on, enclosing, people say, 100 acres of the city's eastern end. Venice has no walls against the world. The lagoon is her wall. The only fortifications in the city face inward, and they guard this. The engine. The gate itself stops you flat. A white triumphal arch, the first of its kind anywhere, built when your great-great-grandfathers were young, flanked by carved lions the Republic has looted from Greek harbours, and above everything the winged lion of St. Mark holding his book. On the church facades, the lion's book lies open at the words of peace. Here the carvers made a decision that tells you everything about this place. Within these walls, works of war. The book is shut. You wait at the gate among carters and rope merchants while a clerk finds your name on a list, and through the opening, past the guard's shoulders, you get your minutes of looking, and you spend them the way a starving man eats. Basins of enclosed water big enough to float a fleet. Covered slips in long arcades, each one cradling a galley skeleton, ribs up, like the whales of God. Smoke standing in columns from the pitch houses, and everywhere moving with the unhurried certainty of men who are the best in the world at something. The Arsenalotti, 2,000 of them in these lean years, sawyers, oar-makers, smiths, and your own tribe, the caulkers, whole companies of caulkers, men who do what you do but at the scale of nations. They are an aristocracy of the hands. They carry the Doge on their shoulders at his coronation. They alone guard the mint and the great council when it sits. Their bread is baked in the Arsenal's own ovens, and the story, Piero swears it, is that a crew of them once framed, planked, caulked, and launched a galley in the hours between sunrise and sunset while a French king sat at dinner, purely so that when he rose he would understand exactly whom he was dining with. A caulker near the gate, a grey man built along Zwayne's lines, sees you gawping with your barrow and reads your trade off your knuckles in one glance. The tar, the mallet calluses, the splinter scars. Whose boy? Zuanes, at San Travaso. He nods slowly, the way men nod at a name that rings true when rapped. Small yard. Good yard. He tips his chin at the basins behind him, the ribs, the smoke. You know what this place is, boy. This is the same seam you packed yesterday. Just longer. He almost smiles. Everything in this city is one trade. Keeping the water on the correct side of the wood. The Doge does it with treaties. We do it with hemp. Ours hold better. He signed your paper and you trundle your barrow of state oakum back into the ordinary streets, and you're most of the way home along the Riva, the great southern quay, with the whole basin of San Marco opening on your left, the Doge's palace like pink lace on stone, the two columns by the water where they execute the worst criminals between them, which is why no born Venetian will walk between those columns, ever. And you don't either. You go around, everyone goes around. When you look up, and keep looking up, because ahead of you the campanile of San Marco is standing against the moving clouds in a way that makes the whole earth seem to tilt. 300 and more feet of plain brick shaft with its green pyramid cap and its golden angel at the very point, and you have never been higher off the ground than a loft, and you have half a lira in your pocket, and the keeper at the base takes coin from anyone who wants to make the climb. Here's the thing about the campanile that nobody expects. There are no stairs. There is a ramp. A brick ramp, wide and shallow, corkscrewing up inside the tower's hollow shaft, around and around a central core, built that way, they say, so that a man could ride a horse to the top, and an emperor supposedly once did. You climb in twilight, round and round, your footsteps coming back at you off the brick, the little window slits strobing past with slices of rooftop that get slowly, alarmingly deeper, your thighs starting to burn somewhere past the 20th turn, the air cooling, the pigeon and dust smell of high places growing, and then the ramp gives onto the bell chamber, and the light hits you, and the wind hits you, and this city hits you. Venice from the top of the campanile is the only place Venice ever confesses what it actually is. From the street the city lies to you. From the street it's all facade, marble and shadow, a maze pretending to be solid ground. From up here you see the truth. It's a fish. A great fish-shaped raft of rooftops, russet and brown, floating on a silver plate. And the Grand Canal is a green serpent swallowing it in a reverse S, and beyond the roofs in every direction. Water. Nothing but water. The lagoons spread out flat and shining to the rim of the world, pricked with islands. Murano to the north with its glass furnaces smoking. San Michele, the low green line of vineyards and orchards on the outer islands. South, the long dune thread of the Lido holding back the open Adriatic, and beyond it the true sea, a darker band of blue, patient, enormous. You can see the channels through the lagoon shallows, darker braids in the pale water, the secret roads only pilots know, marked out with lines as wooden posts like stitching. You can see, if you look northwest on a clean day, and today is clean, the mainland, and behind the mainland, unreal, floating, white, the Alps. The actual Alps, the mountains your maestro's people came down from, the mountains your timber comes down from, snowlit at 80 miles, hanging in the sky above the marshes like a promise or a threat, and directly below, you make yourself go to the parapet, your palms flat on stone, your body leaning back even as your head leans out. Directly below, the piazza has become a chessboard for insects, and the gulls are flying beneath you, and you can see straight down onto the 5-lead domes of San Marco itself, grey humps like the backs of surfacing whales, and every roof in the city shows you its private rooftop platforms of wood, where the women dry their washing and bleach, their hair golden in the sun, a whole second secret city of rooftops the street never sees. The bells hang around you in the chamber, big dark presences, and one of them is the Marangona herself, your bell, the Colker's bell, close enough to touch, her bronze lips scarred with centuries, and you do touch her, one fingertip quickly, the way you'd touch a sleeping animal. The keeper, coming up behind, has watched 1,000 boys do exactly this, and still leans on the parapet beside you companionably. Pick out your parish yet. You find Ossoduro, the long southern district. Find the Zattere by its timber rafts. Walk your eye up the small canals and... there, a gap in the roof line, a sloping brown scar down to the water, tiny gondola splinters on tiny trestles. The Scarrow. Your loft is under one of those hand-sized rectangles of tile. Your whole life since Pellestrina fits under your thumbnail at arm's length. Small, you say, before you can stop yourself. Everything's small from here except the water, the keeper says. That's why they send the lookouts up, and that's why I'd never live anywhere but down in the streets. A man shouldn't see how he's outnumbered more than once or twice a year. He straightens, bones cracking. Storm coming tomorrow, by the way. You can see them from up here half a day before anyone below feels the wind. See that line south? You see it. A faint pencil stroke of darkness laid along the sea horizon. Tell your maestro to double his mooring lines. You go down the ramp in the blue dusk, round and round, your knees jarring, the world reassembling itself around you turn by turn. Water, then rooftops, then windows, then at last the ordinary human street, torchlit, shoulder high, and it has never once felt so thin. All the way home along the darkening quays you carry the fish-shaped city in your head, the silver plate, the mountains hanging in the sky, and the pencil stroke of storm, and when you tell Zwain about the storm line he doesn't laugh at you. He goes out in the last light and doubles the mooring lines and adds a spring to the Sandilo's bow and checks the tie-downs on the trestled hulls, all without a word, and the next afternoon when the Sirocco arrives exactly as promised, and the Rio climbs its banks and slaps at the top of the slipway for 6 loud grey hours, he says the closest thing to a compliment you'll get that season. The tower's good for something then. One more day from the before time, a good one. You'll want it later, and so will I. It's the day Zwain sends you to Murano, and to get to Murano you must do the thing your body has been homesick for without telling you. Cross open lagoon. The errand is glass, oddly enough. A small commission for a patron, a pair of glass lamps for gondola lanterns, and the yard's payment for some favour is fetching them. And Murano is where all the glass in Venice comes from by law. And here's the law's reason. which is pure Venice, fire. Glass furnaces burn day and night, and a city of wooden roofs and wooden boats learned centuries ago what one loose furnace spark can do. So the Republic simply picked up the entire industry, every furnace and master and apprentice, and moved it to its own island a mile out in the northern lagoon. Officially fire safety. Actually, also, mostly on secrets. Murano glassmakers make the finest glass on earth, mirrors and goblets thin as a held breath, and the recipes are state secrets in the fullest sense. A glassmaster who carries his knowledge abroad is pursued by the Republic's agents, and the stories about how those pursuits end are not told in front of children. Gilded cage is the phrase, and the masters live in it richly. Their daughters may marry into the nobility, alone of all craftsmen's daughters, and the cage stays locked. You take the Sandalo, your Sandalo, you think of her now, the one whose seam shamed you a lifetime of months ago, and you row north out of the city's canals, and the walls open and the lagoon takes you. If you have only ever seen Venice's canals, you do not know Venetian water. The lagoon is another country, a mile of pewter-coloured shine in every direction, so flat and so bright that the boats far off seem to float in air, hulls dissolved, black sails hanging above nothing. The city behind you composes itself into its postcard and then into a smudge, and the silence, not true silence, better, wind over water, the dip and drip of your own oar, and everywhere, once your ears settle, birds. This is the part nobody paints. The lagoon is one vast bird republic. Herons statued in the shallows, egrets like flung linen, ducks in flotillas, and over the mudflats at low tide, when the water peels back and miles of brown slick shine under the sky. Clouds, actual weather-sized clouds, of wading birds turning all together, flashing dark, flashing white. And you learn, out here, why the pilot's trade exists, because the lagoon is a liar. It looks like open water. It is a maze with the walls removed. Under that innocent shine, the bottom rises and falls like a drowned countryside, because that's what it is, river-mouthed and marsh drowned. And the safe channels wind through it invisibly, and the only map is the brick-hole, the great oak post driven in lines and clusters, leaning, weathered, silver-grey, crowned with gulls, marking the road the way milestones mark a Roman one. Stray from the posts and the lagoon will take your keel gently without drama, and hold it, and let you spend 6 hours contemplating patience until the tide chooses to give you back. Every Venetian boy learns the channels the way farm boys learn field paths. You're learning them now, standing to your oar, reading the water's colour. Green dark is depth, tea pale is trouble. The sun on your neck, the salt smell clean out here. Actually clean. The city's breath left behind. And for an hour you're 8 years old again on Pellestrina water, and nobody has ever died anywhere. Murano announces itself by smell and sound before shape. Wood smoke and something mineral, hot and dry glass smell, and a low continuous industrial roar you feel in your chest as you tie up. The breath of dozens of furnaces that are never allowed to go out, because a cooled furnace cracks and a cracked furnace is a family's ruin. You deliver your chit at the fondamenta of the glass workers, and while the lamps are wrapped in straw, a journeyman not 5 years older than you, chest bare under a leather apron, skin shining, waves you in to see pride, pure pride, the same pride that makes you show off a rung seam, and you stand in the furnace hall and watch. Watch a man gather a blob of orange light out of a roaring hole on the end of an iron pipe, and roll it on a slab like honey, and put the pipe to his mouth and breathe, gently, the way you'd breathe on an ember, and the light swells into a bubble, and then hands and gravity and a wooden paddle and a wet newspaper's worth of seconds, and the bubble is becoming a vessel, turning, always turning, drooping and corrected, kissed with a second gather, pinched with tools that look like your own pliers' elegant cousins, and the heat on your face is like a hand pushing, and the roar eats all talk, and the men work in a sign language of nods and finger flicks, and in under 10 minutes there is a jug with a handle, a curved lip, a foot, standing on the Marva, glowing sunset colours and cooling toward transparency, made out of breath and sand. Fire and breath, the journeyman shouts happily in your ear. That's all it is. And you shout back, because Guild Pride answers Guild Pride. Water and hemp, same trade. And he laughs and doesn't understand and claps you on the shoulder anyway, and sends you off with the straw-wrapped lamps and a glass bead the size of a hazelnut, blue with a white spiral drowned inside it. For luck, or for a girl. Boatmen, he says, they're mostly for a girl. The row home is into the low sun, the city rebuilding itself ahead of you out of golden haze, tower by tower. You can pick out your campanile now like a friend in a crowd. And you come back down the Rio of San Travaso in the last light with glass in the bows and salt on your lips. And the pumpkin girl is at her brazier on the fondamenta. Her name is Cecilia. You've known her name for 5 months and used it 3 times. She sells roast pumpkin in slices, autumn through spring, the poor man's sweetness, hot orange half-moons off a charcoal grate, and her hands are always warm and her chin is always up, and her father is a boatman of the Nicolotti faction, which Piero says makes her practically royalty on this side of the city. You buy a slice you do not want. The pumpkin scalds your fingers through the vine leaf it's served on. The smell is caramel and char, and the sweet steam gets in your eyes. That's what gets in your eyes. You eat it too fast, standing there while she banks her coals, and then, with the exact courage it takes to caulk wet and blind in a rising tide, no more, no less, you put the Murano bead down on the rim of her brazier and say it's from the glass island. It's nothing. It matched the evening, and you leave before your face can finish what it's doing. Behind you, you hear her not laughing. There are 100 ways of not laughing, and you will spend that whole winter cataloguing which one it was. Supper that night is the good kind. It's a Friday, so fish, and Zwin's wife, Donna Franca, has sent down a pot of bisato, eel, lagoon eel, stewed dark with bay leaves and a slick of oil, the flesh coming off the spine in rich grey-white curls. And there is proper bread and the last of the summer's figs, and the men eat mostly in silence the way tired men do. Elbows on the timber, the pot scraping, someone's knife tapping, the fire ticking down. And Monego tells one story, an old one, about a pilot he knew who could smell his position in the lagoon in fog, actually smell it. Mud of Marghera, weed of Sant'Erasmo, Murano's smoke, and navigate a fish cargo home blind. And nobody believes it, and everybody believes it. And in your loft later, the 2 glass lamps are stowed in straw below, and the bead is gone from your pocket to its posting, and the tide is doing its slow work under everything, and you lie there 16 and salt-burned and stupidly entirely happy in the last October of the old world. I told you you'd want this day. Keep it somewhere the smoke can't reach. And in that same first year, before everything, you're given the gift the trade gives only once. You watch a boat be born, a new gondola, not a refit, not a patch, new from nothing, ordered by a merchant of San Barnaba who has done well in the Levant trade and wants the world to see it move. It will take months, in and around all the other work, and those months rearrange your idea of what your own hands are for. It begins on the floor. The teaser has a floor of long boards kept clear at one end, and Zwain and the master builder, because caulking is Zwain's crown, but a whole boat needs the Squararolo proper, a lean silent man called Isepo who has built more than 100 hulls and speaks about 11 words a week, lay out the boat full size in chalk and battens on that floor, working from nothing you can see. No drawing, no paper. There are the templates on the wall, black with age, the shapes of stem and stern and key frames cut in thin board by dead men. And there is a stick, the stick, a wooden rule scored with marks whose meanings live in Isepo's head and nowhere else on earth. And there is his eye. He bends a baton through 3 points, stands over it, looks at it the way you'd look at a horse you were buying, moves one nail a finger's width, looks again, and the curve that results is the sheer of a boat that does not exist yet. And 40 years from now, gondoliers will argue in wine shops that Isepo's boats ride the crossing chop at San Marco sweeter than anyone's. And it will be because of where that nail went this morning. You're allowed to hold the chalk line. You hold it like the host. Then the keel, straight oak, sighted down 100 times, and the stem and stern posts scarfed on, and then, over weeks, the ribs. The ribs are where the crookedness enters, the sacred crookedness. Station by station the frames go up asymmetric, the port side fuller, the whole skeleton gently listing like a man leaning into wind, and seeing it bare like that, before planking hides the secret, is like being shown how a bird's wing works from inside. And the planks, larch, chosen board by board, Isepo rejecting one for a knot you cannot even find, are made to bend by fire and water, the plank propped, soaked, and a long fire of marsh reeds lit along under it. Flame and steam working together, 2 men lean in their weight on the free end, the wood groaning, giving, a sound like a door opening in a tree, and taking the curve and holding it, and being nailed home while it still thinks it's soft. The smell of that work, scorched wet larch and reed smoke, is the smell you will miss most at the end of your life, and you don't know it yet, and now you do, and your part comes last and lowest and best. When she's planked, she's yours, seam by seam. A new boat's caulking is the examination the water itself will grade. You do the garboards, both, and half the bottom. Menego alongside, Zwain above you saying nothing at volumes you have learned to read, and the day she goes down the greased slipway, stern first, always, with a boy at the bow line which is Nan shrieking joy, and takes the water of the Rio with a bow wave like a curtsy, and sits there floating exactly on the lines Isepo chalked on a floor months ago, dry as a psalm inside. The whole yard is silent for about 4 heartbeats. Then everyone pretends they were never watching, because that is the liturgy, and Isepo says one of his 11 weekly words, var. She goes, and spends it like a ducat. But a gondola without an oar is furniture, and the oar without its rest is a stick, and so you are sent, with the new boat's measurements in your head, to the remer, the oar-maker, and this errand shows you the trade's hidden aristocracy. The remer's shop is up a side Rio, deep and narrow and smelling of walnut shavings, sweeter than your pitch by a whole world, and the floor is ankle-deep in blonde curls of wood, and along the walls hang the strangest beautiful objects Venice makes, and doesn't show its visitors, forecoal. The forecola is the rowlock of a gondola, but calling it a rowlock is like calling San Marco a chapel. It is a single piece of walnut grown, seasoned for years, then carved into a twisting, shouldered, elbowed shape like a wave held still, and every bend of it is an engineering decision, because the gondolier does not just pull his oar, he works it in 8 different positions against that one piece of wood. The long push of open water in one notch, the short chop stroke in another, the braking, the backing, the pivot that swings 40 feet of boat around a blind corner in a canal 8 feet wide. Each manoeuvre has its own bearing point, carved to fit not gondolas in general, but this boat and this man, his height, his stance, which is why the Remer, before he carves, watches your merchant's chosen gondolier row, the way a tailor watches a man walk. The Remer himself is younger than you expect, 3rd of his name in that shop, and he lets you hold a finished Forcola while he checks his notes, and the holding is the lesson. The thing weighs like a small child and balances in your 2 hands with its grain flowing through every curve unbroken, because it is carved with the tree's own logic, never against it, and it is polished only by handwork, and it glows a deep tobacco brown, and it is, you realise with a small shock, the single most beautiful object you've ever touched, and it will spend its life outdoors in the rain being shoved by an oar. People ask why not make them plainer, the Remer says, reading your face, not looking up from his notes. Plainer doesn't row better. He looks up. It also doesn't row worse. So the question is only, what kind of city do you want to be? He goes back to his notes. In the corner, an apprentice younger than Nain is sweeping walnut curls into a sack. Nothing is wasted. The shavings go to the smokers of fish. The oar itself, when it's done weeks later, is a beech blade 11 feet long, flexible as a wing, and the gondolier who comes to collect boat, oar, and Forcola together handles the 3 of them the way a swordsman handles a sword that fits, and rows the new hull away up the Rio in the evening light with that long standing stroke that is the city's own signature. Knock, hush, knock, hush, and the whole yard finds reasons to be near the water gate until he's out of sight. That July, the last July of the before time, you get the feast that will matter most, though you can't know why yet. The Redentor. 3rd Sunday of July every year, and here is where it comes from, and listen closely because the city is about to rhyme with itself across your own lifetime. 50-odd years before your night in the loft, in the Great Plague of 1576, the one that took Titian and a third of the city, the Senate made a vow. Deliver us, and we build you a church. The plague passed, and on the island of Giudecca, across the wide southern channel, Palladio, the most imitated architect who will ever live, though nobody there knew it, raised the church of the most holy Redeemer, white and calm above the water. And once a year since, the city keeps its side. A bridge of boats is built, barges lashed hull to hull with a walkway laid over, a floating road clear across the Giudecca Canal, 1/3 of a mile of water turned to street, and Doge and Senate and the whole population walk across the sea to give thanks. You cross it in the crowd at dusk with Piero and half the parish, and walking on a bridge of boats is a sensation no bridge of stone can counterfeit. The road breathes. It lifts and settles underfoot with the wake of every distant barge, a slow, alive movement coming up through your knees, thousands of people strolling on the back of the water in their feast clothes, and below the planking you can hear the lashed hulls working against each other, creak and knock, the whole road quietly discussing its own existence. And then the night, the water of the channel filling with boats decked in lanterns and paper lamps and vine leaves, families eating supper afloat, roast duck, sarde and sour, sweet wine, watermelon cooling on strings over the side, hull tied to hull in rafts of cousins, music going boat to boat, and at midnight the fireworks, and 1629s are good ones. The sky over the basin opening in white and gold, every burst doubled in the black water so the fire blooms above and below at once. The bangs slapping back and forth between Giudecca and the Zattere, sulphur smoke drifting through the lantern light, Nanny asleep across 3 thwarts with his mouth open, Piero in love 2 boats over, and the great white church floating above it all with torches on its steps, a promise kept and kept and kept. You are 16, on the water, in the light. Somewhere north of the mountains the armies are already moving that will carry the old passenger south. Within 18 months the city around you will vow a second church in words almost identical to the ones that built this one, and you will stand in the ruins of this exact crowd and hear it done. But not tonight. Tonight the water is on fire with celebration and nothing else. And the road across the sea breathes under 10,000 feet, and you walk home over it in the small hours, the planks lifting, settling, lifting, like the chest of something enormous and friendly asleep. Hold all of that now, the well line and the glass island, the new hull curtsying into the Rio, the road of boats breathing under the feast crowd. Hold it the way you hold a breath before going under. Because year is turning and history does not knock. It comes up the trade roads the way the tide comes up a seam, silently, patiently testing, and the city that taught the world how to wait 40 days is about to be examined on its own lesson, in its own water, by the oldest enemy it has. The merchants at the Rialto can smell it before they can name it, the way Zwein's hands smell rain. Grain is dear. Letters from Verona have stopped being about business. And in the yard the work goes on, mallet and iron, strike and feed, because the work always goes on. But you notice, one October morning, that Menego has taken to crossing himself when the Sanitar boat passes, quickly, low, an old man's private punctuation. And old Menego, who was young in 1576, does not waste gestures on things that are not coming. The weeks that follow are the last ordinary weeks, though of course nobody stamps them ordinary at the time. Ordinary is only visible afterward, the way the shore is only visible from the water. You learn the yard's deeper rhythms. You learn that Tuesday is the day the timber merchant comes and must be flattered, that the parish priest of San Travaso blesses each new hull with holy water and expects a cup of wine and gets 2, that the gondoliers who bring their boats in for work divide, like the whole city, into 2 ancient factions, the Nicolotti of the west and the Castellani of the east, who brawl on bridges for glory on feast days, fists only, mostly, and that Ascero must serve both, and joke with both, and belong to neither. You learn to sharpen an iron on the stone until it shaves your thumbnail. You learn that when Zwein's hands ache before rain, and they always know, the work moves indoors without a word being said. You learn the ferro, too, the tall bright comb of iron on a gondola's bow, the one piece of the boat that is allowed to shine. The smith who makes them tells you, filing away in his shop that smells of scorched water, that the great forward blade stands for the Doge's cap, and the 6 teeth below it for the 6 sestieri, the 6 districts of the city, and the single tooth pointing backward for the Giudecca across the water. Maybe he invented it that morning. Maybe it's as old as the boats. In Venice you are learning. Nobody can tell you where the customs end and the city begins, because they are the same substance, like tar and hemp in a finished seam, and then comes the censer, Ascension Day, the feast of feasts, the day Venice marries the sea, and if you've never heard of this, hold on, because I promise you every word of it is real. Each year for 600 years on this day, the Doge of Venice, the elected prince of the Republic, an old man in cloth of gold, boards a ship that exists for no other purpose, the Bucintoro, a floating palace, 100 feet of carving and gilt, blazing gold from waterline to stern castle, rowed by 100 and more Usnalotti, the shipyard men, pulling in silence below decks while the state glitters above them. And this golden impossibility is rowed out through the lagoon to the Lido, to the gate where lagoon meets open Adriatic, with the whole city following on the water. Thousands of boats, every gondola and barge and fishing smack afloat. Black hulls and bright awnings packed gunwale to gunwale. And there at the sea gate, the Doge stands at the stern and speaks to the Adriatic as to a bride, and drops a golden ring into the waves. We espouse thee, O sea, in sign of true and perpetual dominion. A city that throws gold into the water once a year to remind the water who is in charge. You may draw your own conclusions about whether the water has ever agreed to the marriage. The yard goes, all of it, in the yard's own sandolo and a borrowed topo, and you row out into the greatest crowd of boats you will ever see. The lagoon has become a floor of wood. You could walk, people say, from Venice to the Lido across the decks, and today it's nearly true. The sound is like nothing on land. Thousands of hulls knocking, water chuckling in the narrow gaps, oars clashing and apologizing, singing from one raft of boats, a lute from another, vendors sculling between the packed hulls, selling wine and fritters and roasted gourd seeds, handing them over the water. Coins passed back, boat to boat to boat, with perfect honesty, because everyone is watching everyone. The smell is tar and crowd and fried batter, and under it the sea, the actual open sea, pushing its clean salt breath in through the Lido gate. And when the Bucintoro passes, you are close. Piero jams your boat into the second or third rank by pure Chioggia rudeness. The gold of her is not like gilded wood at all. It is like looking into a furnace, and the trumpets crack the air, and the whole floor of boats roars, and you roar too, you can't help it. Your chest does it without asking you. And you see it. Small at that distance, but you see it. The flash of the ring, falling, a spark of sun that touches the water and is gone. The sea takes the gold. The sea always takes the gold. 600 rings are lying down there in the mud of the sea gate. 600 years of the proudest city on earth paying, if you think about it, and standing in your rocking boat you suddenly do think about it, paying tribute and calling it dominion. Afterward there is the fair in the piazza, 2 weeks of stalls under the arcades, and you spend your saved soldi honestly. A fried fish, a ribbon you will never admit is for the pumpkin girl, 1 glass of good wine that makes the mosaics of San Marco swim pleasantly. The golden basilica glows above the crowd like the inside of a lidded eye. You stand in the middle of the richest square in Europe with tar in your knuckles, and for one whole evening the city is exactly what it pretends to be. That is the last feast day. Hold it. The city would want you to hold it, because the sickness is already inside the Watergate, and now the story must tell you how, since the city itself would spend the next year arguing about it. Some said it came with a carpenter from the mainland, but the tale Venice itself came to believe, the one written down, the one with a name in it, is this: that in the early summer of 1630, with plague burning through the mainland towns, an envoy from the Duke of Mantua's people, one Marquis de Striges, came to Venice for negotiations. The city, being careful, being Venetian, did not let him roam. He was lodged in quarantine, kept on the island of San Clemente, away in the lagoon. All correct, all according to the rules the Republic itself had taught the world. And within days a fever broke out in that lodging. A carpenter who had worked there sickened, and the fine invisible thing had what it needed. The rules were good. The rules were the best in Europe. Water is patient, and it had found a seam. The first you know of it is not a proclamation. It is a door. You're carrying a mended oar back to a customer in the parish of San Vio, late June. Heat lying on the canals like a wet cloth, and in a narrow cale you pass a door with 2 boards nailed across it, raw new wood on old paint, and a paper pasted to the boards with writing you can't read, and a mark you don't need to read. A man of the parish is standing at a respectful distance looking at the door the way people look at a fire that is out but still smoking. Sanità, he says when you slow. Health office. Whole household shut in. Fever in the house. 40 days. Or, he doesn't finish the arithmetic. Keep to the middle of the street, boy. You keep to the middle of the street. Behind the boarded door, faintly, you can hear a child. You walk home fast, the oar on your shoulder, and the city you walk through has not changed at all. Washing overhead, cats in the sun, a woman singing to her bread oven. And that is somehow the worst of it, that it has not changed. Because now you know what you're looking at. Planks over a seam, and the water already inside. After that the days count themselves differently. It comes slowly at first. That's what nobody tells you about plague. The terrible slowness of the start. Week upon week of maybe. A rumour of deaths in Castello. A denial. The health office magistrates, the provveditori alla sanità, working by lamplight. You see their boat now on the canals, and people fall silent as it passes the way they do for a hearse. The doctors argue, publicly, furiously, some swearing it is true plague, others, and not the least of them, insisting it is only a malign fever, that the word itself should not be said aloud, because the word closes ports, the word stops trade, the word is worth millions of ducats, and Venice is a city where even death must get past the accountants. Padua's great university doctors are consulted. The city waits on the diagnosis of the age, and while the learned argue, the yard works, because boats do not caulk themselves in any weather of history. But the work changes around you. Traffic thins on the Rio. The Grimani steward, collecting the gondola whose garboard you packed with your own hands, wears a cloth soaked in vinegar over his nose and pays without touching the money to anyone's palm. He lays the coins on the gunwale, and Juan, expressionless, drops them into a bowl of vinegar, where they lie like little drowned suns. Vinegar is everywhere now. The city reeks of it, sharp under the summer stink, the smell of fear trying to disinfect itself. Coins in vinegar, letters slit and smoked over juniper fires before they're handed on. At the bakery, the breadwoman takes your money in a long-handled copper ladle. Piero jokes less, then Piero jokes differently. Then, one morning in high summer, Piero doesn't come. Chioggia, someone says. Gone home to Chioggia while the boats still run, to his mother. You never said goodbye. You find you keep looking up from the seam at the hour of the day he used to trundle the barrow down, and the yard is very quiet, and old Maniga works beside you now, slow and exact, his mallet ring and yours falling into step without meaning to, 2 bells keeping each other company. In August the arguments end because the dead end them. The counts go up past any fever's excuse. The word is said, the word is written. And the Republic, give it this, whatever else. once it stops denying, does not do things by halves. The machinery 200 years in the building turns over and engages, and you watch the most organised state in Europe go to war with something it cannot see. The Lazaretto Vecchio, the plague island in the South Lagoon, fills with the sick. The Lazaretto Nuovo fills with the touched, the families, the contacts, the maybe, for their 40 days. And when the islands overflow, and they overflow fast, the Republic does the most Venetian thing imaginable. It builds more Venice on the water. Old hulks, big merchant hulls past their working lives, are towed out and moored in lines in the lagoon and turned into floating wards. Thousands of people quarantined on the water itself. From the Zattere of an evening you can see them far off toward the Lido, a low black archipelago of ships going nowhere, lanterns coming alight one by one as the dark comes down, and you stand with your feet on good stone and count lights until you make yourself stop. And the boats. This is where the great die-in reaches into your trade, into your yard, into your hands, and this is the part you will tell no one about for years. Everything in Venice moves by water. Everything, which means the sick move by water. The dead move by water. The health office needs boats the way an army needs wagons. Boats to carry doctors, boats to carry the shut-ins to the islands, and the long, low, tarred boats with no ornament at all, whose cargo you understand the first time you see one pass the square at dusk, riding heavy, rowed by men in waxed canvas gowns, moving down the middle of the Rio in a silence that spreads out from it like a bow wave, every window closing softly as it comes. Those boats work brutally hard in all tides, loaded past wisdom, and boats that work hard leak. One grey morning a Sanitar official steps off a boat into the yard. Cloth mask, vinegar sponge, a paper with a lion of St. Mark stamped at its head, and requisitions the scaro's labour in the name of the most serene republic. Repairs, caulking, quick work and no questions for boats in state service. Zwain reads the paper for a long time for a man who reads slowly, and then he looks across the yard at you and at Menego and at the two journeymen, and he says the only thing a maestro can say to the Lion of St. Mark, which is, "We'll want pitch, send pitch." So now the boats that come up your slipway at dawn are the boats. You caulk them. You know what has soaked into their bilges. You scrub with vinegar until your cracked knuckles scream, and you pack the seams of the plague barges of Venice with your own two hands, kneeling on the earth of the Scaro, mallet ringing, and here is the strange thing, the thing you could never have guessed. The work holds you together. The seam does not care what year it is. The seam wants hemp, wants it tight, wants the note to climb from dull to clean, and for the hours that your whole mind is poured into 6 feet of the larch, the fear has nowhere to sit. Strike, feed, strike. Old Menigo on the far flank, his ring answering yours. You are 16, and you are learning what every generation learns in its catastrophe, and cannot pass on in words. That ordinary competence doggedly repeated is a raft, and you can float on it through almost anything. Almost. There is a night that autumn, before the yard boy, before the worst, that you must live through with me, because it holds everything the plague year was in one darkness, the water rising, the city shuttered, and you out in it with one oar. It begins with the wind swinging into the southeast at dusk and staying there, and old Menego lifting his head from his work like a dog and saying one word, aqua. Everyone in Venice knows the arithmetic he's doing. Sirocco wind piles the Adriatic into the lagoon's front door. If it lands on a high tide and worse, a full moon tide, the sea does not visit the city. It moves in. Aqua alta. high water, and tonight is 2 days off the full moon. And of course tonight is the night the message comes. A sanitar boat has gone lame at the traghetto of San Barnaba, sprung a seam, taking water fast, and it cannot wait for morning because at dawn it is needed, and you do not ask what for, nobody asks what for any more. Zwein's hands are a ruin in this weather. The journeymen are gone or shut in. He looks at you across the pitch fire for exactly as long as it takes a man to hate necessity. And then he starts packing the tool bag himself. Irons, mallet, a coil of tarred hemp, tallow, a horn lantern, a small crock of soft pitch that you will keep warm the only way you can, inside your coat against your body like a fat, greasy heart. Middle of the canals, he says. Touch no one. Take the vinegar. Back before the tide tops. Rowing at night in Venice in a normal year is a trade of its own. There are no street lights. There are shrines. Little lamps burning at corner Madonnas, oil paid for by the parish, and those small warm points are the city's only constellation, and boatmen steer by them, shrine to shrine, the way sailors steer by stars. In a normal year there are voices too, wine shop doorways, other oars, the whole warm murmur. This year there is nothing. This year the shutters are blind, the shrines burn for empty streets, and the only sounds are your own oar, knock, hush, and the wind up high, combing the chimneys and the water, which is wrong. You feel it before you understand it. The boat riding differently, the bridges coming down at you lower than they should, and at the third bridge you have to crouch. Actually fold yourself flat over the thwart with the stone arch brushing your shoulder blades, because the canal has risen into the bridge's throat. The tide is coming in with the wind behind it like a crowd with an army behind it. At San Barnaba the lame boat is where they said, made fast to the traghetto poles, and she is low by the head and lolling, and there's a man of the sanitar waiting on the fondamenta with a lantern, muffled to the eyes, who will not come within 5 yards of you. Nothing personal, nothing is personal now, and who indicates the boat with a jerk of the light and stands off upwind. You work alone, by horn lantern, in a rising tide, in a plague year, 16 years old, and it is the finest work you've ever done, and I will tell you why. Because it has to be. You go down into her bilge. The smell hits you. Vinegar over something the vinegar has lost the argument with, and you make your mind a plank, flat and grained and thinking of nothing. And you find the seam by hand, cold water threading over your knuckles, stronger than a weep, a steady vein. Too much water to dry the wood. You'll have to cork it wet and blind, which is the trade's black belt. You bail first, 20 minutes of scoop and throw with your back screaming to get her head up. Then you kneel in the wet hemp across your knee and you feed the seam by fingertip. Feel, set, strike. Feel, set, strike. Driving each strand against the water's push, the mallet's ring deadened by the wet wood, so you can't trust the note and must trust your hands alone, the pressure coming back up the iron, the seam's hunger slackening strand by strand until the cold vein under your knuckles thins to a thread, to a seep, to a shine. Then tallow worked over it hard with your thumb finding every splinter it has ever met, and last the pitch from inside your coat, still barely soft, smeared and smoothed like a poor man's bandage, to hold until she can be hauled and done properly. 2 hours. When you climb out onto the fondamenta, your knees won't straighten, and the fondamenta is under water, not deep, a skin of it, black and moving. The canal and the pavement gone to one surface. the lantern light lying on it in shivering bars, and here is what Aqua Alta actually is, since the paintings never show you. It is the city losing its outline, every edge you trust, the line where stone ends and water begins, the line your whole survival is organized around, gone, dissolved, the sea sliding thin and silent across the squares, into doorways, up the church steps, indoors, where you can hear it in the ground floors, a soft multitudinous lapping in the dark like the city drinking. Nobody drowns in it usually. It comes to the shin, the knee and bad corners. It doesn't need to drown you. It's not a flood. It's a reminder. The landlord walking his property. The muffled official calls across the water, voice cloth flattened. The Republic thanks the yard. The paper will say so. Go home, boy, before the tide tops. You go home through a Venice with no floor. You cannot walk. The pavement's a lagoon. So you row, and now you can row anywhere. Over steps, across the corner of a campo, the world's map redrawn, your oar touching bottom where women stood gossiping at the well bell a month ago, and the wellheads themselves standing up out of the black water on their raised stones like buoys, sealed tight, please God, against the salt, shrine lamp to shrine lamp, crouch for the drowned bridges. Once, crossing the mouth of a wider Rio, you see far down it, another lantern moving, another boat out in the impossible night, and you both stop your oars for a moment. Two lights on black water, each deciding, and then you both row on, wide apart, without a word, because that is the whole etiquette of the year. I see you, I wish you nothing ill, stay away from me. And once, this is the part you'll never tell your mother, a voice. From an upper window somewhere above the moving water, a woman's voice, not shouting, just speaking down into the dark. Boatman, boatman, is there any bread to be had? And you have no bread, and the house has the boards on its door, you can see them silvered by your lantern, and the law and the maestro and the vinegar-soaked cloth of everything you've been told all say row on, and you back your oar and hold against the tide and answer up into the dark that there's no bread on this boat, mother. But the parish basket comes at dawn, you've seen it come, hold till dawn. And she says, God go with you then, boatman, as calm as a well, and you row on, and you're still 16, and you understand that you've just been more of a man in 30 seconds of talking than in 2 hours of caulking, and also that it cost more. The tide tops an hour before dawn and stands there, licking at the second step of the teaser, while you and Zwain and the boy Nana sit on the stairs above it, with the tools moved high, not talking, watching the black water be patient. Then, the way it always does, the way it has 10,000 times and will 10,000 more, it turns. It goes back down the seams of the city, off the pavements, out of the doorways, down the slipway, leaving its grey slime signature on everything it touched, and the wellheads stand down, and the edges of the world come back, and Venice picks itself up and wrings itself out one more time. Water is patient, Zwain says, watching it go. It's the second time he said it to you. It will not be the last. You're learning to be. The doctor you finally see close comes later, in the cold, and not to your door. To the bakery, 3 doors up the fondamenta, where the ovens have kept working through everything because bread is the other thing that cannot stop. You've seen the costume at a distance for months, the way everyone has, the figure in waxed black. The beak. Up close it is worse and better than the fear. Worse, because the waxed canvas creaks. Nobody tells you that it creaks. A stiff-coated rustle at every movement, like something poorly alive. And because the eyes behind the round crystal lenses are just eyes, a middle-aged man's tired brown eyes, magnified and swimming slightly, which is somehow more terrible than any mask. Better, because when he speaks, the beak pointing at the floor, his voice coming out muffled and vinegar-scented from among the dried roses and juniper packed in that leather nose, he is asking the baker's wife, with tired courtesy, to describe her lodger's fever and writing her answers in a notebook with a pencil, leaning his paper on the doorframe because he will touch no table in the house, and he holds his wooden cane. The cane is for lifting the sick's wrists, for pointing, for keeping the world at its length, the way Zwain holds a scribing baton, a tool held by a workman doing his trade. He straightens, sees you waiting well back in the street with your bread money in your ladle-reaching hand, and the crystal eyes take in your knuckles, your pitch stains, the smell of you. Squareo, boy! The beak dips, almost a nod. You corked the San Barnaba boat in the October water. You didn't know your work had a name attached to it anywhere in the world. Yes, sir. She stayed dry 3 weeks under loads I won't describe to you. He tucks the notebook away inside the creaking coat. He is turning to go, and then he stops, and the tired, magnified eyes come back to you, and he says the thing you will still be repeating to apprentices of your own when you're Zwain's age and your own right hand is curling. They call what I wear a costume and what you do a trade. It's the same suit, boy. Wax against the water, pitch against the water, 40 days against the water. None of us knows why it works when it works. We hold the seam anyway. The beak swings away down the fundamenta, canvas creaking, cane ticking on the stone. Hold the seam. Now the hard middle, the month the survivors afterwards skipped over in the telling, and then the winter passed, because there was no way to say them. We'll say some of them. First, the men everyone fears second after the disease itself, the Pizzica Morti, the corpse carriers. The name means, roughly, the ones who pinch the dead, who take hold of them, and the Republic hires them the way you'd expect. From the galleys, from the prisons, from the ranks of men with nothing left to lose, offering pay and pardons for work no one else will touch. They go in waxed smocks with bells. Some wear little bells so you hear them coming, which is either mercy or horror depending on the hour. And they carry the dead down to the boats, and they clear the shut houses, and the stories about them are terrible, and some of the stories are true. Theft from the dead worse than theft. But here is what you actually see. The one time you see them working close, from across a narrow Rio, unable to leave because your boat is under your feet and the tide is against you. You see 2 exhausted men carry an old woman down a staircase with the care they did not have to spend. You see one of them stop and shift his grip so that her head does not knock the door frame. Nobody's watching them. They don't know about you. There is no pay in that gentleness and no pardon for it. And then they lay her in the boat with the others, and one of them stands for a moment with his hands on his knees like a spent rower, and the other waits for him, and then they row on. You will hear men called animals for doing that work for money. You saw what you saw. The city in deep winter, plague winter, is cold, in a way even Manigo says is new. Fuel is short. The firewood barges from the mainland run thin through the cordons, and the cold comes up off the water and in through every wall, and in the yard the pitch takes twice the wood to keep working. So Zwain rations the hearth by hours, and the rest of the day you work in fingerless mitts, Donna Franca knitted, your breath in clouds over the seams, the mallet sting biting different in the cold, sharper, up the bones of the forearm. Ice comes some mornings, not the sea here almost never, but skims of it on the sheltered Rio corners, grey glass panes that your bow crackles through, and once a hard week when the small canals catch properly, and boys who should know better go sliding, and one goes through, and is hauled out blue and lives, and his mother beats him on the fondamenta out of pure love, while the whole parish watches with approval. And the hunger of news. This is a hunger the histories forget. Palestrina is an hour's sail away, and it might as well be the Indies. Movement between the lagoon towns is choked by health passes, and your island is fishing folk, and fish must move or rot, so the boats still run under license, but not for visiting, not for a boy's homesickness. What runs instead are letters. You can write. The parish priest on Palestrina taught the boys their letters between tides, God keep him. And so once a month or so a smoked, slit, vinegar-passed, fee-paid scrap reaches you in your father's heavy scrawl, and the scrawl says almost nothing and everything. All well here by God's grace. The island keeps the ban. Your mother salted 40 barrels. The Rosa needs her seams come spring. None here does it like a city man. And that last line, you understand, is your father across the water finding the one way his hands know to say, I am proud and I am afraid. Come home alive. He is saving you a boat to Cork. You write back on paper that costs a day's food. All well at the yard by God's grace. The maestro trust me with the deep seams now. Tell mother the city eats worse than she thinks, and I dream of her eel. You do not write about the boats you repair. Some seams you pack from both sides. The guild holds. This is the thing you'd never have predicted at 16, and will never forget at 60. When everything liquid in the city freezes, trade, law courts, weddings, the very foot traffic, the old solid things bear the weight. The parish, the school, the confraternities, and the guild, the Corkers and Squarerolis box, the common chest every member pays into in good years, a coin here, a coin there, that you'd privately considered one more tax, opens in the bad one, and you watch Zwain sit as one of 3 trusted men at the teaser table on a Sunday, counting out relief to the shut-in families of the trade, so much to the widow of a man you never met from a yard across the city, so much for the physician's visit to a journeyman's child, so much for candles, for bread, for the fees of the dead. No one applies, no one is refused. The 3 men know every household in the trade the way they know their own tool racks, and the money goes out the way pitch goes onto a seam. Where the water is coming in, exactly there. No speeches. You are 16 and poor, and you put your coin in the box that Sunday with your own hand, the full soldo, and walk home taller than the money warranted. And Cecilia. I have not forgotten her, and neither, it turns out, does anything in you. The brazier disappears from the fondamenta in the worst months. Gatherings are banned, street selling choked, and her corner is bare for so long that you stop letting yourself look at it, which means you look at it twice a day with your eyes shut. Her father's traghetto is requisitioned like everything else that floats. You hear he's ferrying for the Sanità at San Basilio, which is heavy duty in every sense. You hear nothing about the family, and there is no polite way in this year to ask about anyone, because every question is the same question and nobody wants to make another person say it. Then in Lent, late February, the light just starting to lengthen, the death carts thinning, the city daring to breathe in small sips. You come back from the well with the yoke and the buckets, and the smell of char and caramel hits you halfway down the fondamenta, and you nearly go into the canal, buckets and all. The brazier, the coals, the orange half-moons, her chin up, a little thinner, and on a cord around her neck riding outside her shawl where a thing is worn when it is meant to be seen, a blue glass bead with a white spiral drowned in it. You stand there with 40 swaying pounds of parish water on your shoulders, and you cannot think of one word in Venetian, Italian, or church Latin. "Well," says Cecilia, turning a slice with her tongs, not looking up, in the voice of a woman resuming a conversation interrupted by nothing much. "The glass island. Still standing, is it?" "Still standing," you manage. "Good," she says. "So are we." And she holds out a slice of pumpkin on its vine leaf, and when you fumble for your coin, she looks at you for the first time, one whole look, direct as a mallet, and says, "Your money sleeps today, boatman," which on this fondamenta from a Nicolotti boatman's daughter is a sonnet and a promise and a war banner all at once, and you eat the pumpkin standing in the cold sun, scalding your fingers, and it is the finest meal served in the entire Republic of Venice that day, and I include the Doge's table, spring proper, and the city's pulse comes back beat by beat, and with it a strange season of accounting, not only the terrible official kind, the parish registers, the magistrate's sums, but the small human audits. Who is behind which door? Which voices are missing from the well line? And which, please God, are only moved? Shops reopening one by one, each unshuttering a small parish event, people finding excuses to walk past and look in and say nothing, be glad. The first wedding in the parish since autumn draws a crowd like a coronation. People weep at the church door who don't know either family. Nobody finds this odd. And on the water, the traffic thickening week by week, the shouts coming back to the Grand Canal, freight and argument and song, the city refilling with its own noise like a lung, and one May morning you realize you have rowed the whole length of the Rio without passing a single boarded door, and you ship your oar and just sit drifting, letting the tide carry the boat, and the sun is on the water, and the water is on the stone, and somewhere above a woman is beating a carpet out a window as if thumping the ear itself out of the wool, and that ordinary drum beat whack, whack, whack over the green water is the most beautiful music composed in Italy in 1631, whatever the choirs of San Marco were doing that morning. The vow, meanwhile, is being kept. Across the water at the Grand Canal's mouth, on the customs point, the site is chosen and cleared, and the piles begin to go in, and this you must hear with a caulker's ears. To found the salute they will drive, the records say, over 100,000 piles, oak and alder and larch, whole northern forests, and pile driving is done by hand. A timber rig, a great weight hauled up on ropes by a crew, and let fall, hauled and let fall to the beat of a chant. The pile drivers have their own songs, work songs older than anyone, the rhythm keeping 40 pairs of arms honest, and for years, that sound will carry across the water of the basin to every quarter of the city. Thud, thud, thud. Slow as a giant's heart, the sound of Venice keeping a promise, hammering its grief down into the mud where the drowned trees hold everything, tree by tree by tree, until there is ground where there is water, and on that ground, white above the tide line for as long as the city lives, the church. You will row past the site 1,000 times in the years ahead, and you will never once do it without thinking. Same trade. Wood into the water so that what matters stays dry. The Doge does it with churches, we do it with hemp, hold the seam. Autumn 1630, and the city goes quiet in a way that Venice has never been quiet. Understand what noise is here, in normal years. Venice has no wheels, so its noise is human, and its noise is water. Voices, oars, Bells, footsteps, song. Take away the voices and you do not get silence. You get the other half, alone. Water knocking on stone with no one talking over it. Your own footsteps in a collie and no others. The bells still ring, they ring more than ever. They ring for the dead in every parish, until the government, they say, orders the death knells limited because the constant tolling is killing the living early. You walk to the Rialto with a message and cross the whole market in the time it used to take to shove 10 yards. Half the shops shuttered. Grass. Actual grass. Thin and shocking. Starting in the seams of pavement where 1,000 feet a day used to polish the stone. The bank's benches empty. A city of perhaps 140,000 souls, and by the worst months the officials will count the dying by the hundreds in a single day. The pest house islands burn lamps all night. The doctors go about in the costume that will outlive them all in nightmares. The waxed gown, the crystallized hood, the long beak stuffed with dried flowers and vinegar-soaked sponges against the bad air, because bad air, miasma, is what the best minds of the age believe carries it. They are wrong about the air. They are right by accident about almost everything else. Distance, isolation, burned bedding, 40 days. The rules built for the wrong reason are the rightest rules in the world, and they are all the city has, and the city clings to them. At the yard you are 4, then 3, one journeyman shut in with his wife's household. You bring bread and leave it on the step below his boarded window, and he lowers a basket on a cord, and you talk upward at his shadow for as long as you can stand it, about timber, about nothing, and his voice is fine, is fine, is fine, until the day the basket doesn't come down. You are 16 and you learn to row a dead man's boat back to his mother. Zwein's curled hand gets worse in the damp, and he ties the iron into his fist with a leather thong and works anyway. Menego calks beside you and tells you, in pieces over weeks, about 1576, how he was younger than you, how they carried his father to the old lazaretto on a boat, like the ones on your trestles now, how his father came back, 54 years ago, and Menego says it with the astonishment still fresh, still shaking his head at it. The boat came back with him sitting up in it. Some come back, he says, striking, feeding, striking. Remember that when the counting gets loud. The boats go out full and they do not always come back empty. You need that in October, because in October it comes to your loft, not to you, to the yard boy, the child, Nain, 10 years old, who sweeps shavings and dreams of oars, who sleeps across the loft from you under the same tiles, and who one evening does not eat, and by morning is shaking, and there is a swelling in the crease of his groin the size of a thrush's egg, and you know you have heard it described 100 times by now. Everyone in this city is a doctor of one disease. What happens next happens fast, because the Republic has made it fast. Zwein sends for the parish sends for the sanitar, and before noon there is a boat at the Skerra's water gate. One of the boats, one you may well have corked, and 2 men in waxed canvas, and Nain wrapped in his blanket, crying for his mother who is 3 parishes away and cannot come, and it is you he grabs for at the top of the slipway. Your sleeve, your tarred sleeve, and what you're supposed to do is stand back, and what you do instead is carry him. Down the slipway you have walked 10,000 times, into the boat, and you settle him in the bows on the folded canvas, and his hot hand will not let go of your sleeve. So for a moment you crouch there in the plague boat, in the smell of vinegar and pitch, your own pitch, and you tell him the only true thing you have. This seam under you, I packed it myself, not a drop comes through. It's a good boat, Nain. It's a good boat, and some come back. The boats don't always come back empty. The men in canvas wait. They are gentler than their masks, most of them. They do this all day, every day, and have not yet turned to wood. Then his fingers are opened from your sleeve, and the boat pushes off and goes down the middle of the Rio with the windows closing softly along both banks, and you stand on the slipway with your empty sleeve until Zwein's good hand lands on your shoulder like a mooring line and turns you and points, wordless, at the trestles. Strike. Feed. Strike. The raft of ordinary competence. You climb onto it and you row. 40 days is a long time to listen for one boat. The city, meanwhile, does the other thing it knows how to do. Besides organise, it prays and it bargains. In October, with the dying at its terrible height, the Doge and Senate of Venice make a vow, publicly, before God and the people, the same vow their grandfathers made in 1576 when they promised the Redentor. They vow that if the Virgin will deliver the city, Venice will raise to her a new church, a great one, and go to it in procession every year forever. Salute, health, and salvation. The two are one word. They vow it, and then, being Venice, they immediately form a committee about the design. And the site they will choose in the months ahead is that very gap of air you used to look at from the Zattere. The open point at the mouth of the Grand Canal, the city's front door, where a young architect named Baldassare Longhena, barely past 30, will raise on more than 100,000 new wooden piles, driven into the same old mud the white-domed church that every picture of Venice you've ever seen is secretly a picture of. Marble above, drowned trees below, the city answering catastrophe the only way it knows, by building on water one more time, higher than before. You are there. Everyone still on their feet is there. For the great procession when the vow is proclaimed, the image of the Virgin carried through a city on its knees, and you walk in the guild's place with the Squararoli and Calafai, the boat builders and caulkers. Thin ranks now, and the chant moves down the packed and hollow-eyed processional route, not like singing in a church, but like the tide itself, a sound with weight, and you find you are weeping without noticing you started, and so is the man beside you, and nobody looks at anybody, and the sound carries you all forward like hulls on a flood. Winter clamps down. Cold is a mercy. Everyone says the cold slows it, and the counts do fall, and rise again in a last cruel spring flare and fall, and on a raw bright morning at the end of the 40 days, and then some days more that nearly kill you with their arithmetic, a boat turns in from the Rio to the Scerro's watergate. An ordinary boat, a hired sandalo, and sitting up in the bows, wrapped in a blanket, thin as an oar and grinning like Piero used to grin, is Nane. Some come back. The boats do not always come back empty. You carry him up the slipway too, the other way this time, and he weighs nothing, and he smells of juniper smoke from the fumigation sheds of the Lazzaretto Nuovo. And Zuan el Calafao, who has never in living memory said the word good, takes the boy's face in his one straight hand, and his one curled one, and says something in the dialect of the mountains his grandfathers came down from, and turns away fast and orders everyone back to work in a voice with a crack down its middle like a badly seasoned plank. The plague burns out of Venice through 1631 the way a tide goes out. Not on any single day you can point to, just less and less. And one morning you realise the bells have been ringing the hours, only the hours, for a week. The counting, when the magistrates finish it, is a number you will never really be able to hold. Somewhere near 50,000 dead in the city, 1 in 3, some parishes worse, and vastly more across the lagoon and the mainland. A wound that great does not close. The city simply grows new life around it, the way a tree grows around an iron spike. In November of 1631, the survivors process across a bridge of boats. Boats again. Always boats. A floating road built hull to hull across the Grand Canal, to the site where the votive church is rising from the water and the Republic keeps its bargain, and it keeps it every year after. And, I will tell you this now, across the centuries, because tonight you have earned it, it keeps it still. Every November to this day, Venice builds its bridge of boats and walks across the water to the salute and lights its candles, and most of the crowd no longer remembers precisely what for. You remember. You were there for the why. The yard fills again, slowly. Trade limps, then walks. Piero comes back from Chioggia in the spring, browner, quieter, with a wife, which astonishes everyone, including visibly Piero. Timber comes down the Piave. The gondolas come up the slipway with their beards of weed, and the worm has not taken the year off. The worm never takes a year off, and the tide still rises twice a day and tests every seam in the city, and the argument between the water and the wood resumes as if it had never paused, because it never had. It was always the same argument. The plague was only the water's other name, and one evening, let it be a spring evening, 1632, the light going bronze on the Rio, the swallow's back, Zwin steps down into a boat you've just relaunched. A gondola this time, a whole refit, and the garboards, both of them, and half the bottom besides, are yours from raked seam to poured pitch. He stands in her, feeling her through his feet. He crouches, lays 2 fingers flat along your deepest seam and waits, while the water slaps and the swallows go over and your heart behaves ridiculously. Dry. He climbs out. He looks at you. A long look, the whole of it. Pellestrina and the 3 ducats and the swamped sandalo under the bridge and the plague boats and the boy carried down and the boy carried up. And he says, next winter you sit the guild examination. And he walks up the slope to his supper, and you stand on the slipway of the Scaro of San Travaso with your hands full of tar and your chest full of bells, journeyman Calafao of Venice, a man whose seams the sea itself must argue with. It will take you years more. There will be master's fees and masterworks and all the long stairway of the guild, but the door is open, and you walk to it through the worst year the city ever suffered, and you did not drop your mallet. That's the day, or the year and a half of days. Let them settle now. Night in the loft, and you know this room in the dark now like a seam under your palm. Nain breathes slow and even across the boards. He snores a little since the island. A small engine, oddly companionable. Rain is walking across the tiles a hand's breadth above your face, unhurried, and below you the yard smells rise through the floor, pitch banked in its cauldron, cut larch, wet earth, tarred hemp, the smell of your trade, the smell by now of you. Your hands ache. They always ache now. They will ache for the rest of your life, and toward the end of it, like Zwein's, one of them may curl itself around the ghost of an iron and stay. There is tar in the creases that will never wash out, only where? Your knees carry the print of ballast stones. This is the body the work builds, and you find you would not trade it, because every ache is a seam somewhere in this city holding the water out. Boats you have made tight are moving in the dark right now all over the lagoon, carrying lovers, carrying wine, carrying, yes, still sometimes the dead. Because that is also carrying, that is also a service, and someone must make those boats sound too, and it was you, and they did not leak. Listen to the city with me, one more time before you sleep. The rain, first on the tiles, under it the Rio, water knocking on stone, the oldest sound here, the sound that was here before the first pile was driven and will be here after the last one rots. An oar, somewhere, late, knock, hush, knock, hush, a boatman going home, a cat, a voice, brief, and a shutter. The watch calling the hour, far off, and under all of it, too slow to hear, only to feel the tide, easing out now, down the seams of the city, down through the black mud, past the heads of 1,000,000 drowned trees standing patiently in the dark, holding up the marble, holding up the gold, holding up the loft and the straw and the boy from Palestrina with tar in his hands. Centuries will pass. The Republic itself will end. Quietly, with a signature, on a day no one tonight could imagine. The Bucintoro will be broken up for its gold. The last plague will leave Europe. The lagoon will be spanned by a bridge with iron rails, and the city will fill with strangers from every nation on earth, come to look at what the mud and the marble made together. But the Scerra of San Travaso will still be there, that exact yard, the same sloping earth to the same water, the same wooden mountain barn of a shed, and men in it still, building gondolas by eye and thumb and template, still leaning the hulls crooked so they run straight, still fighting the water seam by seam. 400 years from your night in the loft, it will still be there, one of the last, and travellers will stop across the Rio and watch a man burn old pitch off a black hull, and never know they are watching the far end of an unbroken chain that has your hands in it. Some things don't change. The water does not change. The need to keep it out does not change. And the tired body at the end of an honest day, the aching hands, the raft of ordinary competence, the earned and heavy sweetness of lying down, that does not change either. Not in 400 years, not in 4,000. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way the tide takes the lagoon, slowly, evenly, from the edges in. Let the rain keep walking on the tiles. Let the bells ring the small hours to somebody else. Let your hands, your good, tarred, hard-working hands, finally open. You're warm enough. You're fed enough. The seams are tight, all of them. You checked. Not a drop comes through. You've earned this rest. Take it, and dream of black boats running true on quiet water. Good night.